I wanted to start off with a quote. This one I have known for so much of my life, and I can't seem to quite escape it just at a central core of sort of my pedagogy for creating art and trying to incorporate science and art together. So this is a quote by Baba Dioum, who is a Senegalese forestry engineer, and he says, "In the end, we will only conserve what we love. We'll only love what we understand, and we'll understand only what we are taught." Which is sort of what I hold true as a tenet of why I try and create educational theater. Um, but wait, who am I? Hopefully that's the next slide. Oh, it is wonderful. About me. So my name is Logan Robbins. I use he and they pronouns. I'm based in the Unnatural region of Mi'kma'ki in Nova Scotia, Canada. And I am a theater maker and an art science theater maker and someone with a very meandering past in and out of science and art. When I was younger, I wanted to be a scientist and I wanted to work with animals, and I was incredibly interested in how to communicate with people the challenges happening with biodiversity loss and other situations for wildlife across the planet. And one of my first jobs in my life was I was a zookeeper, and I learned immense amounts about animal husbandry. And I was also a wildlife educator, and I traveled across the country doing wildlife education about international biodiversity, about habitat loss, and also about native species here in Canada. And this is really what ignited the passion I feel for trying to tell stories about the natural world. And also specifically why I really love Asian elephants, because I had the enormous privilege of getting to know one on a personal level, as you see here in this picture with me when I was just a little baby. This was a really long quote. I'm only going to read you part of it. This is a wonderful book. If you haven't read it, I'd recommend it. It's really hard to make art about the environment or about wildlife because the situation is dire. And I work a lot with youth, and more I encounter this sense of eco-anxiety or climate anxiety. And I find this book walks a really beautiful line between not having false hope, but also still pushing and striving. The part of this quote I really like is we need something different. Maybe we need the kind of hope you can call upon in an emergency, the hope you call upon when you're going in for cancer surgery or battling addiction or taken hostage or lost at sea, the hope we associate with grace, redemption, deliverance, the hope that not that things will get better, but that we will simply doggedly make it through to the other side. And this is also something I've been thinking a lot about in my exploration of my art science background. In 2019, started a theater company called the Unnatural Disaster Theater Company, where I create work about the natural world and also push quite hard for a sustainable theater practice. Theater is often by nature and necessity an incredibly wasteful industry. No theaters have room to store things, and it's also an industry that's often run on a shoestring where cheap alternatives often take precedent over sustainable options. So I do a lot of site-specific outdoor storytelling. This was a musical about invasive hippos in Colombia that I performed outdoors in bodies of water, connecting people as best as I could to the land and to the world of the story. And this was from a musical I did called Bottom Dwellers, a deep sea musical, which I did last year with the Canadian Ocean Literacy Coalition, which was where I've really started to work directly with scientists on how to tell stories, especially for young audiences, that advance ocean literacy, climate literacy, and understanding, but also can engage in an entertaining way. So in this photo, you're actually seeing a hagfish singing a song to an urchin and a crab, because young people especially are really good at suspending disbelief. Um, how it started. So this whole project started really from an idea that I had over a year ago at the first ever creature conserve workshop I attended. It was a writing workshop about sort of writing and understanding from perspective of animals. And I got really inspired by the idea of diving into scientific literature for inspiration. And what I thought would be really interesting is transforming scientific literature and the actual paper itself into a work of art. So this is sort of been my cornerstone piece of art for the whole thing. So this one, I call it erasure poetry. It has other names. Sort of sprung off into what you will soon learn was a 45-minute clown show. But the idea was with this piece is that there was a figure on this about protected wildlands in China as of 2003 when the paper came out, and only 7% of the wildlands were protected. So I calculated how many words were on the page and then erased all but 7% of the words for this visual representation. And what this really sparked in me was this desire to artistically, visually, emotionally represent data in a way that it could have an even greater impact and kind of leap from the page into the hearts and understanding of those who are taking it in, ideally of all ages too, because I strive often to not just create for very young people or adults, but just something that can be understood and enjoyed and accessed by a wide group of people. As you can see from this erasure poem I made, I think not last February, but the one before, this photo here is from the performance we did of the show 3 days ago. It's been a very tight end zone turnaround for this. And it ended up making its way into the show with the use of this wonderful overhead projector, which was sort of the main focal medium for the show. Why elephants? I talked about this a little bit already. I really love elephants. There's been a lot of interesting conversation about this sort of resistance to focus on charismatic megafauna, which is 100% what I leaned into with this, but with the intentionality of the show itself as an experiment in form. So I really wanted the subject of the show, which is there's these two clowns. I will explain this soon, but there's two clowns and they're trying to present a lecture, and the lecture is on Asian elephants. And the reason I chose Asian elephants, other than my personal connection to them, is I really wanted the actual experimental nature of the show to be as broadly understandable and testable as possible, which is why I went for a very charismatic megafauna that I hoped that most of the audience would have heard about. But my desire is, as the show keeps developing, to be able to expand now that I know what about the show works and how it works, and how data can be artistically expressed. I want to start using that as a formula to highlight other species and less represented creatures as well. But for the sake of this experiment, Asian elephants work splendidly. Also in this slide, you can see I'm a puppeteer. I just needed space for those photos, but I've learned through puppetry, there are really incredible ways to bring animals and stories to life in front of an audience. Okay. Abstract, a Sci-Clown show. What even is it? So Abstract was written by me in collaboration with Haley Christie Hoyle, who's an incredible performer from British Columbia. And it is a show about two clowns. Professor Moss, who I play, is trying to deliver a lecture on Asian elephants, but is a little too caught up in the bureaucracy of academia and is really, really in love with the data on the page, but hasn't quite figured out how to best communicate it. Whereas Sphagnum has a much more creative take on how to present data. And the two of them butt heads and try and ultimately figure out if science communication is more of an art or a science. And ultimately, in the end, I think what they find out is you need both. And that's what's most successful. So it was sort of a meta exploration of science communication and how art and science can come together to actually make an impact. So very much inspired by the mission of Creature Conserve itself, and really wanted to explore how this could be done. Oh, and inspiration. I am really inspired by everyone at Creature Conserve, hearing all of the different ways that the artists have taken data and information that they're passionate about and have been artistically expressing it. That's really what inspired this show. So thank you to all of you who are here, because this is a show that is about how can we take numbers and percentages and graphs and transform them into artistic expressions where the data can kind of pass through a threshold of understanding to a more general public. For example, in this photo here, we used a disco ball to represent population fragmentation of Asian elephants. So Sphagnum, the clown, illuminated the disco ball. And as we discussed different structures that could be built that are fragmenting wildlands like roadways and pipelines and cities. They were adding cutouts, paper cutouts to the disco ball, fragmenting the shards of light until ultimately the shards of light were all disconnected. And it was a really beautiful effect in the room that I think illustrated the point that we were trying to illustrate. Progress. This was a huge discovery process. I was working on this even a little before the mentorship program started, just the idea. And then it all just kind of started happening. Writing the show, doing the research, and then figuring out how to perform it. As I mentioned, performing sustainably is incredibly important to me. So I really wanted to make sure that this show was sustainable. So the only real set piece is a huge screen of recycled paper that we used that you can see sort of that we project onto, and that was taken down and recycled after the show. And then my overhead projector, which is an incredible tool. Oh my gosh, they are wonderful for shadow puppetry and for light and for playful exploration, but they're also something people associate with learning, or at least those of us who still had them when we were in school. And it was just an incredible process of getting to work with my collaborators who helped me on this and with my mentor on trying to figure out how to make a clown show that was educational and entertaining and somehow a synthesis of both. Because if it could be a synthesis of both, it would kind of prove the point of its own existence. And I think I did, which is very exciting. Professor Moss, that was me. I'm just watching my time. Okay. I'm gonna skip this video for now and come back to it if we have time. But that was me. I'm a puppeteer and a performer as well as a writer and science nerd. So I had a very good time performing as Professor Peter Moss. And then there is Sphagnum, the more artistic counterpart who comes in and sort of takes Professor Moss's world by storm because they are trying to turn all of the data into these artistic expressions. The response, as I mentioned, I've been working on the show for a very long time, but it came together very quick toward the end. The only time I was able to book the theater in Halifax was 3 days ago. So we were rehearsing and performing just up until 3 days ago. I got the photo and video from our photographer yesterday. So this has been a very hasty slideshow, but hopefully it is demonstrating what I would like it to. I won't read this whole quote, but we did have an invited audience of theater practitioners and educators come to this sort of workshop showcase that we did live here in Halifax. And it was really informing and really hopeful to hear. It's I think when you create, and probably many of the artists in this Zoom room agree, it can feel very insular. That's one of the things I loved about the mentorship, having a sounding board, having someone to reaffirm this is working or this isn't working, and to kind of guide you. So having an audience provide response after the show that it was sort of doing what I was hoping it would do was very validating, which we need as artists and humans, I think. So that was really wonderful. Um, why clowns? This is a question that came up a lot through my creature conserve time. And I think this review from an audience member sums it up kind of very nicely. They say they don't normally love clowns, but generally associate them with horror stories, but love the physicality of the two of us. And now when they think of clowns, they'll think of us rather than it. Um, I think clowns, like puppets, like mask in theater, have this kind of transcendent ability to move beyond culture and language. And there's something universal about clown. There's two characters. My character, Professor Moss, talks a lot, but the character Sphagnum doesn't talk at all until they sing a song, which you'll hear soon. And this sort of dialogue between language, both verbal and other expressions of language, I think has an appeal and a reach, and I think it accesses a hopeful part of us, and a childlike part of us. This is a great Kurt Vonnegut quote that I think explains why clowns, especially the sad clown. He said, "Should I tell people how bad I think it is? Everything is going to become unimaginably worse and never get better again. And if I lied to you about that, you would sense that I'd lied to you, and that would be another cause for gloom." This was a real motivator for my character, Professor Moss, who is a pessimist, who is downtrodden, and this whole idea of we need to be brutally honest about the challenges and the struggle. Whereas Sphagnum, the other clown, is maybe brutally optimistic. And I think what they find is there is this world in the Venn diagram between pessimism and optimism about climate, about wildlife, where they can meet and where art and science come together. The music. There was a song that Haley and I wrote that comes at the end of the show. Professor Moss and Sphagnum have sort of had a falling out, and they come together at the end, and Sphagnum finally speaks for the first time in the 45-minute show and sings this song to the professor to try and apologize, also to try and reaffirm and reassure them that it's okay to care and that they're greater together. So I have this little trailer I made that's over a cut of the song. There's subtitles. I think I've got time to show it and then hopefully still finish my thing. I'll go so fast. But yeah, here it is.
The problem feels big and I am so small. It feels like nothing I can do would even matter at all. So why should I try if all it brings me is pain? It's not like just one tiny clown can make a change. But then I met you, and I realized I'm not alone. All along I should have known that underneath that painted on frown, you've got a smile deep down. Now I can see, though we do things very differently, we want the same things ultimately. And if we work together, we've a better chance to get there. So is it more of an art or a science? Guess we won't really know till we try it. With all the charts and the graphs and the songs and the crafts, there'll be something for everyone. It isn't the lens that you peer through, it's the dreamers and friends who are near you. If you speak from your heart, it's both science and art. It works best when you're having fun, and we've only just begun.
The problem feels big, and I am so small. I worry nothing I can do will matter at all. So why should I try if all it brings me is pain? There's no way to see a rainbow without seeing some rain.
But then I met you,
Then I met you,
and I realized I'm not
neither
alone.
you or I are
All
alone.
along I should have
I
assumed.
could have assumed with elephants between us there are none in the room. No, I succeed. Although we do things very differently.
We want the same things ultimately.
And if we work together, we've a better chance to get there. So is it more of an art or a science? Guess we won't really know till we try it. Between the charts in our hearts and all the sums of our parts, we're greater together. It's somewhere beyond education.
That's where you'll find communication.
If you speak from your heart, it's both the science and art. It's what happens when you're having fun. And I've only just begun.
I've only just begun.
And I've only just begun.
I've only just begun.
And we've only just begun.
What's next? This show was an experiment. I really wanted to know if it was possible to do a clown show about science using actual scientific papers, projecting them on screen and pulling data and info from them and transforming it before the audience into these artistic expressions. Ultimately, yes, it worked. So what's next is I want to keep developing the show. I want to maybe expand the scope beyond Asian elephants to other creatures, to other ecosystems. And I want to keep developing it and performing it. It's in theater what we would call a very tourable show, which is good because you want to be able to travel and to share it and perform it maybe across Canada, maybe further. The show ends with the two realizing art and science are stronger together at upholding what their message is. And it ends with Sphagnum drawing a Venn diagram of you and me and proposing to Professor Moss, what is it that we have between us? And Professor Moss, instead of writing anything, turns it into an elephant, which is the kind of final image of the show.